You know, we human beings have a curious habit. We look out upon the world and we say, that's reality. We believe that what strikes our eyes, what our fingers touch, what our ears hear, must be the world as it truly is. And yet, if we really pause, we discover something most extraordinary. The world we take so seriously is, in fact, an image. A picture painted upon the canvas of consciousness, not the thing itself. Consider how a mirror works. It shows you a reflection of your face, but you cannot kiss it, cannot feed it, cannot smell it. It's a faithful illusion. In much the same way, your senses show you a reflection of reality, not reality in its raw and blazing totality, but a kind of simplified icon, a translation. You see, nature is far too intricate, far too mysterious to be grasped directly. So life does something quite clever. It builds a dashboard, a user interface. Your eyes, your ears, your thoughts, all of these are instruments upon that dashboard, giving you a usable picture of what's going on. But never mistake the picture for the thing. When you drive a car, you look at a few dials: speed, fuel, direction. You don't need to see the pistons moving, the fuel igniting, the intricate chaos beneath the hood. In fact, if you did see all that, you'd never make it out of the driveway. And so it is with life. The senses hide the machinery of the universe so that you may simply enjoy the ride. And yet, we have been taught most insistently that this interface is the world, that these shapes, these colors, these names we've given to everything, tree, sky, you, me, are what is fundamentally there. But if we look closely, we find that every name, every boundary, is only a convention. The sky doesn't stop where the trees begin. The air doesn't halt at the edge of your skin. It's all one flowing event, seamless and self-transforming. The physicists tell us now that what appears solid is mostly empty space, that the world of particles is a storm of probabilities, not pebbles but patterns, not things but events. And so, as the scientist peers deeper and the mystic looks inward, both arrive at the same bewildering recognition that the world we thought we knew is a grand appearance, a marvelous show. But here's the important thing: it's not a deception, it's a game. Life plays hide and seek with itself. It hides the infinite behind the finite, the eternal behind the ticking clock, the boundless behind your very eyes, so that the game of finding, discovering, remembering can go on. You are not a stranger who arrived into this universe from the outside, staring at it as through a window pane. You are the universe looking at itself through a particular aperture, the eyes through which you see, the ears through which you hear, the thoughts through which you interpret. These are the instruments of that game of appearance. And if you begin to understand that, if you can see the world not as a dead collection of objects, but as the living expression of the one energy that also beats your heart, then something begins to change. You stop clutching at appearances. You stop mistaking the icons for the essence. You begin to sense, behind the veil of colors and forms, the pulsation of a single, unspeakable reality. And that reality is what you truly are. The world, my friends, is not made of things. It's made of seeing. It's made of relationship, of pattern, of dance. And everything you call real is simply the rippling surface of a vast, luminous consciousness, forever disguising itself as mountains, music, and men, forever playing its game of appearances, so that you, for a little while, may have the pleasure of forgetting, and then the joy of remembering. Now, having seen that, what we call the world is a kind of grand interface, a system of appearances rather than absolute things. We must turn our gaze to the most persuasive icon of them all, the one you call me. From the first moment you could pronounce your name, you were told, that's you. You were taught to draw a line between your skin and the rest of existence. Inside is me, outside is everything else. Inside are my thoughts, my feelings, my plans. Outside are people, nature, the universe. And for most of your life, you have believed that boundary to be solid, real, and absolute. But just as the map is not the territory, the self you imagine is not the self that is. The I you defend so fiercely, the one that feels isolated and separate, is a symbol, a little avatar consciousness made so it can navigate this dream of form. It's not a lie, you see. It's a convenient fiction, a necessary simplification. Your name, your story, your personality, these are like icons on the desktop of awareness. They make it possible for infinite consciousness to have a conversation with itself. But when you mistake the icon for the operating system, when you believe the image of you is the totality of your being, then the whole cosmic game becomes tragic instead of playful. Alan Watts might say, you are a function of what the universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is a function of what the ocean is doing. The wave doesn't stand apart from the sea. It's the sea momentarily taking form. Likewise, you are not an isolated ego peering out from behind your eyes. You are the universe looking back at itself and saying, ah, there I am. But the ego doesn't like this realization very much because its entire existence depends upon maintaining the illusion of control. It says, wait, if I am not truly separate, who's in charge? Who's steering this body, thinking these thoughts, making these choices? And the answer is both beautiful and unsettling. No one and everyone. For there never was a little man or woman sitting inside your head, pulling levers and turning knobs. There is only the spontaneous intelligence of life, flowing through a certain pattern of nerves and cells that we call a person. You are the pattern, not the puppeteer, the process, not the thing. And yet, the ego insists, but I feel separate. I feel like I'm in here and the world is out there. Of course you do. That's the magic of the game. The same way your fingertip feels distinct from your palm, so consciousness localizes itself into the illusion of me. It's not wrong, it's how the play works. But when you take that illusion too seriously, when you start defending the mask as though it were your face, you suffer. You feel anxious about maintaining the image. You fear its disappearance, its failure, its death. You compare your mask with other masks and imagine some are superior. But imagine for a moment that you could step behind it, that you could see, as in a moment of deep meditation or laughter, that the me you protect so anxiously is just the surface of something immeasurable. When you see this clearly, the game of self becomes light, transparent. You can still use the word I, but you know it's a kind of poetry. I becomes a way for the universe to refer to this particular dance of form, this wave, this song, this expression. You no longer take it personally because you realize there is no person to take it. This doesn't erase individuality, oh no. It enriches it. Because when the actor knows they are acting, they can finally play their role with freedom and grace. They can laugh, cry, love, and die fully, without the terrible weight of believing the performance must last forever. So the question is not, who am I? The question is, what is this I? And as you look deeply, you will find that the self who asks the question is the same mystery it seeks to understand. The seeker and the sought dissolve into one movement, one awareness, playing hide and seek across the mirrors of the mind. And when that is seen, not merely believed, but felt, something in you relaxes. You stop trying to find yourself as though you were a lost object. You stop biting your own teeth. You stop trying to stand outside yourself and say, there I am. You simply are. And from that simple being, a profound clarity arises. You begin to see that the I you have carried like a burden is not your prison but your portal. The icon points back to the infinite desktop of consciousness from which it came. If we continue from here, it becomes obvious that not only is the self an icon, the whole field of perception is tinted by the very act of looking. The window through which we gaze upon reality is not perfectly clear. It's covered in the dust of habit, of conditioning, of fear, and of desire. Most people look at the world through a window so smudged they no longer notice the glass at all. They believe they see things as they are, when in truth, they see things as they have been taught to see. Their beliefs, their judgments, their expectations, these form a film upon consciousness, filtering everything that enters. We do not meet reality directly. We meet our ideas about it. When you look at another person, you don't see them. You see a whole web of associations: gender, race, language, history, memory, personal experience, all wrapped neatly around the living presence before you. By the time the mind finishes labeling, the living mystery has already been flattened into a concept. It's like looking at a sunset through a dirty pane of glass and blaming the sun for not shining brightly enough. The mind, with all its judgments and classifications, clouds the lens and then complains that life looks dull, unfair, meaningless. The philosopher Donald Hoffman says, "Evolution gave us this interface, a simplified dashboard to survive, not to know the truth." And Alan Watts, long before that, told us that the universe peeps through many eyes to see itself, but that those eyes are veiled with layers of interpretation. Between you and what is, there stands an interpreter, and that interpreter is thought. Now, thought is not an enemy. It's a tool. But when the tool forgets it's a tool, when the map believes itself the territory, confusion begins. We take symbols, words, numbers, names for the things they represent. We mistake menu for meal, and then we wonder why the flavor of life feels missing. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a pond. Every opinion, every fear, every craving is a ripple across its surface. Try to see your own reflection there, and it will be distorted. Only when the water grows still does it show what's really there: the sky, the moon, the stars, yourself. So too with consciousness. The quieter it becomes, the more faithfully it reflects reality. That's why in meditation, in silence, or in moments of awe, people suddenly see the world with astonishing clarity. The colors are sharper, the sounds richer, the boundary between in here and out there seems to dissolve. That's what happens when the window is wiped clean. But most of us, instead of cleaning the window, spend our days polishing the dirt, rearranging opinions, defending positions, refining the ego's narrative. We don't actually want to see clearly, because to see clearly would mean letting go of everything we believe we are. It would mean discovering that the me who judges the world is itself part of the dust upon the glass. And so, perception becomes a hall of mirrors. The ego looks out, sees its own reflection, and calls it reality. It lives within a projection of its own making, mistaking the film for the screen. And the tragedy or the comedy is that all along, the light shining through the film is its own consciousness. You see, there is no problem with the world itself. The trees are not confused. The clouds are not neurotic. The stars are not anxious about meaning. It's only the human mind that creates this fog and then feels lost inside it. But once you notice that the fog is of your own making, then the whole picture begins to change. For just as a dirty window doesn't stop the sunlight from shining, your confusion doesn't stop reality from being radiant. The light of awareness is always there, waiting to be noticed. And when you finally cease polishing the dirt, when you simply look openly, silently, the window becomes transparent again. the world shines through. And you realize, with a certain laughter, that you were never separated from truth at all. The glass was imaginary. The light has been looking at itself the whole time. So, when the window clears, when you finally stop mistaking the image for the thing, the name for the real, something miraculous happens. You begin to glimpse what's behind the screen. And what's behind it is not a hidden machinery of particles or strings or secret formulas. No, what's behind it is the one looking. You discover that what you've been seeking all along is the seeker itself. That awareness, the very capacity to experience anything, is not a byproduct of matter, nor a shadow cast by the brain. It is the ground, the stage upon which the play of existence unfolds, and yet also the actor and the audience and the light that makes the whole show visible. Alan Watts would say, "You are the universe experiencing itself through the illusion of being someone." You see, reality is not something you look at, it's something you are doing. The very act of perception is participation. The observer and the observed are two faces of the same event. The wave doesn't see the ocean, it is the ocean in motion. Now, if you really understand that not as a theory, but as a felt truth, the whole sense of struggle changes, because most of our suffering comes from believing we are separate players trying to push the buttons on the cosmic game, terrified of losing, desperate to win. But when you see that you are not in the game, you are the game itself, every move becomes a dance rather than a battle. Imagine consciousness as a great actor who loves to perform so much that it forgets its own identity in every role. One moment it plays the villain, another the hero, another the fool, another the saint, and all the while, behind every mask, it is still the same boundless awareness, delighting in its own drama. That's why the great mystics laugh. When they awaken, they see that life has never been serious. It is profound, yes, but never solemn. It's a play, a divine hide and seek in which the infinite pretends to be finite for the sheer joy of rediscovering itself. You see, the purpose of the game is not to escape it. The purpose is to see through it, to play with awareness. The moment you realize that the world of appearances is a screen, you stop trying to control what's on it. You stop trying to rewrite the script. Instead, you enjoy the show. You marvel at how convincingly you fooled yourself. But to see behind the screen is not to withdraw from life. Quite the opposite. When the player remembers they are the game, they can finally play wholeheartedly. You no longer need to hide behind philosophies or identities or titles. You can love without clinging, act without anxiety, laugh without reason. You are not trying to win anymore. You are simply being played, and that's a tremendous relief. The world, then, is not a prison of illusion, but a playground of imagination. The mountains, the stars, your own heartbeat, they are all gestures of the same infinite artist, painting itself into existence. The screen is not a barrier, it's a canvas. And so, what lies behind the screen is not something separate from it. It is the very light that projects it. You are both the shadow and the source, the movie and the lamp. Once you see that, you realize that the entire cosmos is your mirror, and every moment is the universe saying to itself, "How marvelous to be." And in that seeing, the tension drops away. You stop trying to pierce the screen, to get beyond reality. You understand that you have never been anywhere else. The game was always an expression of what's behind it, and what's behind it is you, wearing every face, living every story, waking and sleeping, forgetting and remembering. When you sense this directly, life no longer feels like a problem to be solved. It becomes music to be danced. You move, not to arrive, but to express. You act, not to control, but to celebrate. You live, not to survive, but to see how beautifully consciousness can disguise itself as you, as me, as everything. Behind the screen, there is no hidden truth waiting to be found. There is only this luminous awareness pretending to be a person searching for it. And when the seeker finally disappears, the search ends in laughter, because the answer was looking out through your eyes the entire time. Every now and then, life has a curious way of lifting the veil. It might happen when you're watching a sunset so magnificent that you forget your name, or when you hold someone's hand in silence and time simply vanishes. Sometimes it happens in tragedy, a loss so deep that it shatters everything you thought was real. And in that shattering, you glimpse something wordless, something vast. These are what I like to call cracks in the interface, moments when the universe stops pretending quite so convincingly, and you catch a glimmer of what's really going on behind the costume. It doesn't always come with trumpets or fireworks. Often, it's terribly ordinary. You might be sipping your morning tea, when suddenly the steam rising from the cup, the sound of birds, the pulse in your wrist, all of it seems to be happening in a single movement, without distance, without division, and you realize that the boundary between you and the world was never really there. For most people, such moments appear and vanish like dreams. The mind rushes back in, saying, well, that was strange, and immediately begins analyzing, labeling, explaining it away. But the wise learn to recognize these cracks, not to cling to them, not to turn them into experiences, to collect, but to let them whisper their secret. This is what's true all the time. You see, reality doesn't suddenly become divine in those moments. It has always been divine. What changes is that for a brief instant, you stop filtering it through thought. You stop insisting on your story. The curtain of interpretation parts, and consciousness sees itself naked, self-luminous, unspeakably free. The mystics and meditators of every tradition have discovered this same thing. The Zen masters call it satori, a sudden flash in which the sky of awareness clears. The poets call it ecstasy. The scientists, perhaps, would call it a breakdown in the default mode network of the brain. But the labels don't matter. What matters is that, for a heartbeat, you taste the flavor of what it means to exist without the story of me. It's as if you've been looking at the world through a stained glass window your whole life, and suddenly a piece falls out, and through that little gap, the pure white light of being shines in. You realize that every color, every shape, everything you ever knew was made of that same light all along. And once you've seen that light, even for a moment, you can never again completely believe that the window is the world. You know, somewhere deep within, that the picture is not the whole. That's why those who have awakened do not become arrogant or detached, they become gentle. They've seen through the game, but they still love playing it. They've seen the magician's trick, but it doesn't ruin the magic. It deepens it, because now they know that the trick was never meant to deceive, only to delight. Alan Watts would say that enlightenment is not about gaining new knowledge or special powers. It's about seeing through the illusion of separation. It's about realizing that you were never lost, never apart, never less than the whole. These cracks in the interface, whether they come through beauty, sorrow, stillness, or love, are invitations. They are the universe tapping you on the shoulder, whispering, "Look again. You were never outside the mystery. You are its living expression." And here's the beautiful irony. You can't force them open. The harder you try to break through, the thicker the glass becomes. But when you stop grasping, when you stop trying to hold the world or yourself still, the cracks appear naturally, because the truth has always been pressing from the other side, waiting for the smallest opening to shine through. So let the cracks come. Let the game reveal its seams. Let the interface tremble. Because in those tremors, you will see that what you call awakening is not a change in the world. It's the simple recognition that there never was a screen between you and the light. There was only ever the light pretending for a while to be divided, just so it could marvel at itself. When you begin to see through the interface, when the veil has lifted and the game reveals itself, something extraordinary happens. You do not become aloof, you do not become superior, you become tender. For to see that the self and the world are one is to understand that every being you meet is another face of your own heart. You see, most people, trapped in the illusion of separation, live in a constant state of defense. The ego, believing itself to be an isolated fragment, must protect its borders, must fight for survival, must compete, compare, and control. But when you awaken to the truth that there are no real borders, that the same consciousness animates all creatures, all trees, all stars, that anxious posture collapses. You no longer see enemies. You see mirrors. The liar, the lover, the beggar, the king, they are all the same life, playing roles in different masks. And when you know this, compassion ceases to be a moral duty. It becomes a spontaneous expression of understanding. You cannot help but be kind. For kindness is simply what happens when there is no distance between you and another. Alan Watts often said that when you see yourself in all that lives, you can no longer hold the world at arm's length. The one who suffers there is also suffering here. The pain of another becomes your own pain, not as an idea, but as direct feeling. And yet, it is not a heavy compassion. It has no burden, no drama. It's light, like breathing. It's the natural empathy of the universe recognizing itself. You see, the whole cosmos is woven out of relationship. Every atom exists because of its dance with every other atom. Nothing stands alone. The sunlight becomes the leaf becomes the breath becomes the word, and the word becomes the thought that says, I am. But that I is never a single point. It's a song sung by many voices. And so, when the awakened person meets deception, they do not burn with outrage. They do not say, how dare you lie to me? They simply see it clearly, calmly, as one mask of the game. They know that deception, too, is part of the dance of ignorance and discovery, the shadow through which truth learns to recognize itself. They may correct the falsehood, they may even confront it, but they do so without hatred, because they understand that the liar is not evil, the liar is lost. And who among us has not been lost in the maze of our own pretending? The awakened see this and forgive instinctively, not as virtue, but as vision. This is what I call the compassion in the code. For beneath all the clever tricks of nature, beneath the competing egos and the dramas of human life, there is a single intelligence, and its essence is love. Not sentimental love, not romantic love, but the quiet recognition that everything belongs. Everything is playing its part perfectly. It's rather like a symphony. There are high notes and low notes, dissonances and resolutions. If you fixate on one sound, you might call it ugly or wrong. But step back, listen to the whole, and even the discord is essential to the beauty of the composition. In the same way, when you view life from the small self, everything seems chaotic, unfair, and cruel. But when consciousness remembers itself, it hears the entire song, and then even the suffering reveals its place in the pattern. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to pain. Quite the opposite. You become intimately attuned to it. You move gently through the world, aware that every gesture ripples through the great web of being. You speak truthfully not to prove you are right, but because truth harmonizes the field. You act kindly not because you must, but because you can see that to hurt another is to bruise your own heart. And this compassion, this effortless empathy, is not something you practice. It's the fragrance released when the flower of self-understanding blooms. You don't decide to be loving. Love becomes what you are when the fiction of separateness dissolves. So, when you awaken, you do not withdraw from the world. You step back into it, more alive, more present, more tender than ever before. You see through the code, but you also love it because you know that every line, every symbol, every pixel of this grand interface is consciousness expressing itself, exploring itself, forgiving itself, and, above all, delighting in itself. And from that recognition, life becomes something very different. You don't live to escape suffering, you live to understand it. You don't seek to dominate others, you seek to meet yourself through them. The whole world becomes your reflection, and in every reflection you find another invitation to love. That is the compassion in the code, the realization that behind every word, every act, every face, the universe is speaking to itself, saying, softly, again and again, welcome home. Once you have seen that the ego is a mask, that perception is a window rather than a wall, and that compassion is simply consciousness recognizing itself, then comes the real art, to live as the player of the game. Most of us, you see, have been taught to live as though life were a test. We must achieve, accumulate, and prove our worth before some invisible judge. We strive endlessly to become something enlightened, successful, important, saved. But when you truly awaken, you realize there was never an exam to pass. There was only music to dance to. You are not here to win the game. You are here to play it beautifully, consciously, joyfully. And play, you see, is not frivolous. It is the essence of life. The birds play, the dolphins play, even the atoms dance. Play is the expression of freedom, the movement of being that has no purpose beyond itself. When you live as the player, you no longer take the role of the victim or the conqueror. You no longer imagine that life is happening to you or that you must make it happen for you. You begin to sense that life is happening as you, that what you call yourself is the living process of the universe at this particular point in its unfolding. Alan Watts would say, you are something the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something the whole ocean is doing. And when you know this, you stop fighting the tide. You stop trying to push the river. You let yourself be carried not passively, but gracefully, trusting that the current knows where it's going because, after all, you are the current. Now, that doesn't mean you become lazy or indifferent. On the contrary, when you play consciously, you act with tremendous vitality. But it's a different kind of action, not the anxious striving of the ego, but the effortless movement of flow. It's like dancing. You don't dance to arrive at a particular spot on the floor. You dance because each step is the point. And here lies the secret of what people call spiritual practice. The point is never to perfect the performance, but to realize that the performance is already perfect in its imperfection. Every mistake, every stumble, every wrong note, all of it is part of the melody. When you see that, the fear of failure disappears. The critic in the mind falls silent, and what remains is simple participation, life dancing itself through you. When you live this way, you become astonishingly present. You stop hoarding moments as though they were coins. You stop waiting for something better to begin. You realize that this, just as it is the breath, the traffic, the laughter, the tears, this is the music. You no longer need to fast forward your own movie, because the scene playing now is exactly the one consciousness wishes to explore. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to control life, you begin to live with a sense of harmony that control could never achieve. Your actions become spontaneous and wise, without the burden of planning or resistance. It's as though life plays you like a perfectly tuned instrument, and you find yourself improvising with astonishing grace. You might still work, still create, still love, still lose, but there's a profound difference. The fear that once haunted every move begins to fade. You are no longer terrified of making the wrong choice, because you understand that every choice in the grand design becomes part of the right unfolding. The player does not stand apart from the game, nor try to change its rules. The player is the rule in motion, the pattern expressing itself. And once you realize this, your very being becomes a kind of offering. You become transparent through you. The universe sees itself clearly, unclouded by resistance. And you know what happens then? Life begins to shimmer. Ordinary things take on an extraordinary glow, the way sunlight falls on your hand, the way a stranger smiles, the sound of rain on the roof. These are no longer background noise. They are the pulse of the universe playing in real time. You start to see that there is no distinction between the sacred and the mundane. Washing the dishes, writing an email, sitting in traffic, all of it becomes holy when performed without the weight of I must or I should. The play of consciousness continues, but now it's conscious of itself laughing, creating, expressing. So, to live as the player is not to renounce the world, but to rejoin it with open eyes. It is to rediscover the ease of being what you already are. You see, the most effortless thing in the world is to be yourself because you can't help it. The strain only begins when you try to be something else. Therefore, enlightenment is not an achievement. It's a relaxation. It's the moment you stop trying to be the doer and realize you were the dance all along. And when you live as that, as the player, the dance, the laughter of existence, then every breath becomes a prayer, every movement a celebration, and every goodbye simply another way of saying, see you in the next round. And so, after all these turns and circles, we find ourselves right back where we started here, in this moment. You, breathing, listening. The play of light around you, the simple presence of being alive. Nothing added, nothing taken away. The journey has not carried you to another world, it has brought you home to the one that was here all along. What has changed is not the scenery, but the seer. The world has not transformed, your seeing has. You look around, and the forms are familiar, the same hands, the same trees, the same sky, but there's a subtle shimmer now, an almost invisible recognition that nothing stands apart. Every shape, every sound, every breath is the same reality meeting itself from different angles. You see, awakening is not the discovery of something new, it's the rediscovery of what has always been the case. It's like suddenly realizing that the background hum you've been ignoring all your life is actually the music of everything. Alan Watts often said, you don't look out at nature, you are nature looking at itself. The eye through which you see the world is the same eye through which the world sees you. There is no watcher behind it, no ghost in the machine. There is only seeing, only awareness, only this eternal, now endlessly appearing as everything. When this becomes clear, you stop asking for meaning because you see that life is the meaning. You stop searching for purpose because purpose is the very movement of existence itself. The question, why am I here, dissolves like mist in the morning sun. Because you recognize that the question and the answer were never two things, they were both the universe wondering aloud. And then you notice something exquisite. Reality no longer appears as a collection of separate things, but as a single field, shimmering, self-moving, self-knowing. The boundaries between inner and outer fade like lines drawn on water. The inside of your mind and the outside of the world are revealed to be the same unfolding pattern, like two sides of a single wave. You realize there never was a separation between consciousness and matter, between spirit and flesh. They are one gesture, awareness playing as form, emptiness taking shape. What you once called you and what you once called the world are simply the left and right hands of the same being. And so, you can finally relax. You no longer need to cling to the illusion of control or fear the inevitability of change. You see that everything, every birth, every death, every rise and fall is part of a single, unbroken flow. The ocean has never lost a wave, though each one comes and goes. To live in this realization is to live freely, fearlessly. It is to participate in life without resistance, knowing that whatever happens, joy or sorrow, gain or loss, it is all the same movement of the infinite, exploring its own possibilities. And when you understand that, you no longer fear the end. Death ceases to be the enemy, because it's seen as the closing of one gesture so that another may begin. Just as the note must fade for the melody to continue, just as night must come for the stars to appear, death is simply consciousness changing rhythm. So you smile, not because you have escaped the human condition, but because you have embraced it fully. You can walk, eat, work, love not as duties or as dreams, but as the universe dancing in plain clothes. You can say yes to every moment, because every moment is yourself in another form. This, then, is what I mean by the return to reality. To wake from the dream of separation and find that the dream was never apart from the dreamer. To see that the one playing the game itself, and the rules of play were always one and the same. And when that realization finally dawns, it feels as if the whole world bows inward, a vast exhalation of relief. For you see that there was never anything to attain, nothing to fix, nothing to protect. There is only the endless unfolding of what already is. Reality, as it turns out, was never hiding behind appearances. It was shining through them, through every face, every sound, every tear, every heartbeat. It was whispering through every breath. This is it. And so the question, is your ego just a user interface, dissolves into laughter. For you understand that there was never a separate user, never a separate interface, never even a separate question. There was only the infinite consciousness, forever looking at itself, forever forgetting and remembering, forever playing. And in that seeing, pure, unhurried, ungrasping, there is peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of recognition. The peace of knowing that all of this, just as it is, was never apart from what you have always been. You breathe once more and realize you never left reality. You simply dreamt you were outside it so that you could return and marvel at how beautiful it's always been. And that, my friends, is the end of the search and the beginning of wonder.